Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here tonight for this discussion on psychedelics and consciousness. My name is Eva Cezarova, and I kind of called this discussion to happen tonight under the auspices of CIRES, the foundation, Psychedelic Research Foundation. And for those who don't know, this is a foundation that is supporting the Czech psychedelic research, and you can also support Czech psychedelic research through CIRES. It's my great pleasure to welcome here our colleagues from Imperial College London, Pedro Mediano and Lisa Luan, and my colleague from the National Institute of Mental Health, Marek Nikolic. So please give them a good welcome. So just to introduce our guests today briefly, I would like to mention, and that's also going to be the directions of today's discussion, that Pedro Mediano is his big interest is in consciousness and the realms of between consciousness and psychedelics, and also AI, artificial intelligence, and new technologies, and mathematics.
Sometimes.
So I hope that the numbers today are going to be light on us. And Lisa is, she designed a study of extended DMT intravenous research, which we will definitely touch today, and which is a big thing for the psychedelic science nowadays. And Marek Nikolic is working in National Institute of Mental Health as a therapist and neuroscientist and data analyst, and is one of the therapists in the Psyched research, which is comparing the effect of psilocybin and ketamine in the treatment of depression, and also has a lot of experience from field studies and collecting data on the field. So we will go from very hard science on consciousness and psychedelics, and through the DMT, which is nowadays a big hype, and to the very grounded field studies. So I'm very looking forward. And we will go on for maybe 1 hour and 20 minutes, and then there will be a space for questions from the audience. So please, if you have any, keep them for later. And before we start,
and let's get started. How do we start this? Pedro, how are you?
Really grateful, really excited. It's not very often that I get to visit a wonderful place like Prague and chat with amazing, interesting people. So yeah, excited is probably the kind of first word that comes to mind.
Awesome, thanks. Lisa?
I feel very grateful to be able to be here and to be invited by you. And I also share the feeling of excitement of, being in Prague. It's so beautiful. I just came out of a metro station and it was just amazing. So yeah, thank you.
So maybe, Pedro, what have you been up to this past half year? We were together in Okinawa. Returned back at the beginning of April. So what have you been up to since?
Research-wise, I gather. Yes. So one of the things that me and my lab have been thinking quite a bit about recently is on the topic of trying to basically find out how someone else will do after they go through psychedelic therapy before they actually go through the experience. Right? So what kind of tools, what kind of methods we can use to figure out if this type of treatment is actually the right one for someone, or maybe there's some other treatment that might be best. And that is one thing that we've actually been discussing quite a bit among ourselves.
So we're talking about like distinguishing between people who will respond to the therapy?
Yes, correct.
Right. So what did you guys figure out?
I mean, there's still ongoing work, and it's far too early days. But I think this is extremely important work. And I think that if we really want to make therapies like these accessible and safe and effective, it is something that we owe to the general public to actually figure out, who are the people that are kind of best inclined or best positioned to actually benefit from that treatment.
Right. And just knowing a little bit of your background, you are using some machine learning algorithms to do that.
Yes, a little bit.
Can you go in a little bit into detail? What does that entail?
So it entails analyzing as much basically brain scanning data as we can get our hands on, and then putting them through a pretty sizable number of lines of code, and hoping that the right thing comes out the other end. But it's an iterative process, right? At the end of the day, I guess as far as we're concerned, so we are mostly kind of theory and methods group, so we don't actually collect data. We rely on collaborations with people like the National Institute of Mental Health here and many others, right, to actually provide us with the data for us to actually test our theories, fit our models, and do all this kind of work.
Can you share some of the theories that you have related to this?
Plausibly. Let me think what's a kind of right angle for this. I mean, maybe I perhaps don't have so much that I can say with confidence right now about, clinical mechanisms of psychedelics as much, but I can maybe talk a little bit about theories of psychedelic action in general, that, of course, we believe might be tied to the therapeutic efficacy in some way, but I want to draw a bit of a line between the kind of scientific theories and the clinical mechanism. So I can talk about the science for a little bit, if that's acceptable.
Go on.
So one of the things that we do observe, and this is something that I'm sure Lisa's seeing in her work as well, is that one of the main effects that psychedelics have in the brain is this sort of disordering effect, right? Where the activity of your brain has all sorts of funky patterns of parts of your brain going in and out of synchrony with one another in some more chaotic ways. And these particular ways, these particular patterns become a lot more chaotic or a lot more unpredictable, shall we say, under the effects of psychedelics. And one of the reasons, one of the paths in which we believe this might actually lead to kind of the therapeutic effects is that this allows your brain to sort of break out of, take a break from normal, so to speak, and kind of, how shall we put it, make a new space for new patterns to appear out of this disorder. I'm not sure if that's a kind of answer you were.
Yeah.
Where does this fit with theories of consciousness? Because, for example, one of the standard theories of consciousness say that your self is based on your history, on your self-perception, and then if you take a very large dose of ketamine, you see that these things go away. There is no history, there is barely any self-perception, but there is still self. So what does this tell us?
Good question. I mean, this is precisely why I think psychedelics are an incredibly useful tool for consciousness science. And that is actually the reason why I got into psychedelics research to begin with. Right? So, I mean, I've always, not always, but for a long time, I've been interested in consciousness in general. Like, why is it that, this kind of mush that we have between our ears actually feels like something? It's insane, right? If you think about it. So I come from I actually work in a computer science department. And then your computer has billions of transistors that go click all the time, and you write this code, and then the transistors go click in some way or another. And then your brain also has tens of billions of neurons that also go click, but they do so in such particular ways that it feels like something to be 10 billion neurons. Why does that happen? And not only that, how is it possible that your brain kind of suddenly receives a few molecules per neuron of some completely alien substance it has never encountered in its evolutionary history, and then it feels like something completely different?
It's an interesting thing. The brain never encountered these substances in its evolutionary history.
For some psychedelics, definitely, I think so.
All right, can you be specific?
I mean, I'll be surprised if there's any. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, and I'm not by any means, trained in chemistry, but I don't think there's any kind of natural source of like LSD, for example.
There are similar compounds, though, that also bind to the same receptors, right? And that would cause some maybe epigenetic changes that would predispose the future generations to be more or less responsive to these substances?
Yeah, plausibly. Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely lots of other things that, bind to the same receptors, yes. Absolutely.
But there is also a lot of new psychoactive substances which our brain very probably never encountered before. That's totally true.
Yeah, let's give this direction a little bit. So, what is the dominant theory that you're now using to express this? This little shift in a paradigm in the brain, and then all of a sudden, your perception, emotion, cognition completely and dramatically changes.
Good question. So I should probably start by prefacing this with the fact that there's about, if you get, 20 different consciousness scientists all in a room and you ask them about the theory of consciousness, you get 20 different answers. So I'm going to give you mine, but just with that caveat in front. One theory that I actually quite like, and I don't think it's correct, but I don't think any theory is correct, so this is at least usefully incorrect, I would say, is this idea of, I'm going to say a technical word, but then I'll explain for a bit. The theory is called integrated information theory. And what that basically says is that your brain is somehow at all times kind of in some sort of instinct trade-off or in a balancing act between two tendencies. One of them is this idea of brain regions having to be acting separately from each other. In kind of technical terms, we would call this segregated. So each brain region has to do their thing at the end of the day, right? So your visual cortex has to deal with the stuff you're seeing. Your auditory cortex has to deal with the stuff you're listening to, and so on and so forth. That's on one side, but on the other side, all of these brain regions, they still have to be integrated in some regard, in the sense that they have to be acting cohesively as a whole. And this sort of balancing act between this, acting independently and acting together is what gives rise to consciousness through some, fairly complicated, philosophical and mathematical reasoning that we don't really need to go to. But that's one of the theories that I actually quite like. Again, I don't think it's correct, I don't think it's complete, but it's usefully incorrect. And some of the work that we have in the last few years is trying to make sense of, how and why psychedelics have the effect they do, because or through this kind of lens of integrated information.
And you had some commentary towards that, right? Because I've seen your paper suggesting the weak integrated information theory. What is weak about it? What is this aspect of?
Yeah, so this maybe requires a bit of context. So this integrated information theory, it's a bit of a weird one within the neuroscience, neuroscience of consciousness community, because there's a few people that are extremely vocal about this, and they have some really, really good ideas that often get pushed to extremes that I would not necessarily agree with. I think they're incredible ideas, and we should be pursuing kind of very ambitious, very risky, speculative, theoretical research. But this kind of more weaker version of the theory, so to speak, that we kind of put forward is an attempt to actually kind of bring these ideas back into the more kind of practical realm of actually, well, you can not only do this crazy, theory and very complicated maths, but we can actually use this to, say, analyze or explain why people feel the way they do when they, say, take psychedelics or anything else. And that was the main drive behind this kind of weak version of the theory, which I think makes it stronger, but nonetheless.
Okay, sweet. I have so many questions in this direction, but I wonder, should we include somehow Lisa into this?
Yeah, or I guess I also have a question for you on the integrated
Sure.
information. So like this weaker or stronger integrated information does that, because I haven't read the paper, but can you basically apply that to actual data to...
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Which is one of the reasons why we actually, put it forward. Again, something that is sort of weaker in the theoretical sense, so it makes less kind of grandiose claims about the nature of consciousness, but it's something you can actually try to run on some, brain scanning data you get from a trial, for example.
All right, when you say, let's get a bit more specific here. How can you apply this?
So most of the data that we work with is, of the many, many kind of million things that happen in the body and the mind when, one goes through a kind of psychedelic experience, we typically work with brain activity data, like say typically EEG, like electric data, like through this EEG devices, or magnetic data through an MEG device, or some other messy thing that you get from an fMRI scan. Whatever that is. Yeah. So that's exactly what kind of data our theories kind of take, or not our theories. That's the kind of data that our algorithms take, and then we try to make this sort of theoretically informed analysis of what is actually happening.
How do you do that? What is this analysis?
Math. And more lines of code.
So I know your work on entropy and unpredictability of the signal.
Yes, yeah. So at some level, all of these analyses rely on kind of trying to figure out to what extent different regions of the brain are talking to one another. Mm-hmm. Where talking is, precisely defined elsewhere. But yeah, so basically we kind of read out data from different parts of the brain, and then we ask, okay, to what extent is this part of the brain actually communicating with this other part, all this other part, and so on and so forth.
Right, communicating as in
sending
together.
Sending signals in some way, or
I can't help but when you were sharing the theory, I was actually thinking of a society that each is doing its own thing, and they are passing information, and that's how we move on. No, isn't it actually a similar kind of a symbiotic mirror?
Absolutely. This now perhaps diverges a little bit more into this other field of research, which is actually super, super close to my heart, which is complexity science. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that's something that you've come across, but complexity science is a field of physics. I'm actually trained as a physicist, although it's been many years since I've been in a physics department, but it's still very close to my heart. So complexity science is basically the study of systems that are made of many interacting parts, right? So when you have many, many parts that are interacting in some way and then become a whole.
Like our body.
Like our body, like our brains, like societies, like, ecosystems, like technological systems like the internet, or, a million other things, right? And complexity science is precisely the study of what is common behind, or sort of between all of these kind of seemingly super different systems. It turns out quite a lot, actually.
Interesting if we can use the knowledge from one system to actually look through that optic to the other one from a completely different field. Yeah,
no, actually, funny you mentioned society. So we have this super, I said in a completely unbiased way, super interesting study going on, which is more of it's a very exciting project. We took some of these theories about sort of weak integrated information and all that stuff. We took some of the kind of metrics that came out of that theory, and we actually asked, well, we know that neurons, say, maximize this particular function when you're conscious or whatever. Could people do the same? And then we came up with this really funky kind of social psychology experiment / art exhibition, where we actually gave people hats with a bunch of lights. We set them out in a dark room, and we tell them, walk in the dark room and make your lights synchronize somehow. And their hats have like funky blinking lights, and that's the only thing they see. And by walking, they have to make their lights sync. Now, what they don't know is that there's a camera at the top that's actually watching their movements and then running these exact same algorithms to see to what extent all of these people that are walking in this room are acting as a whole, according to this metric of integration and whatever, right? And they have to start walking in patterns, as we say, like flocking, in patterns that create this kind of high, integration. And they do. So you can actually get groups of people to kind of behave collectively through this funky kind of feedback mechanism. And interestingly enough, when they do, they feel more connected to one another.
How can we apply that to whole humanity?
Good question. So right now we can do 10 people.
It's a good starting
Yes.
point.
I mean, but as a computer scientist, that's just a scaling issue. It's,
The implication of this is that there are 3 types of information, right?
enlighten me.
Well, this was my understanding of what you were doing. So there's I don't know how much of this I can actually share. Is this already published? Is it somehow?
Well, it's hard for me to tell without you actually sharing. So,
So there's information of about the action of individual, and then there's information describing the redundancy between actions of 2 individuals, and then the synergetic activity of all of the individuals.
correct.
Yeah, could you tell a bit more what is the difference between synergy and redundancy?
I can try. So these are basically the synergy and redundancy business is effectively the kind of main mathematical tools that we use to then write all of our theories, based on these 2. And I could, probably spend a week straight talking about these things, but if I had to summarize them in 2 sentences, or 1 each, we say that kind of 2 things, be it 2 neurons or 2 neurons, firing in the brain or 2 people moving or anything, they are redundant when they are doing the same thing. And they are synergistic when they are together without being the same. And this notion of being together without being the same is actually what we believe, or an important component of what makes the brain conscious or makes society work.
So these helmets lit up when people became synergistic.
Yes, exactly.
When the sum of a whole was more than just sum of the parts.
Precisely. And people do this kind of naively. They've never heard the word synergy or complexity before. And they come and they only have to say, we tell them, move around, synchronize your lights, pretend you're a fish. Right, like in those, big, school of fish, swimming around. And they do, actually, and they learn kind of, I hesitate to say subconsciously, but it's definitely not deliberate, right? Like they don't actually know what they're doing, and yet they manage to maximize this synergy.
Do you have any funny, what did you see when this was happening? What did you see, what kind of people were managing?
Yes. It's a lot of fun, actually. So we did this, we were very, very lucky. So we got from Imperial College, we got this kind of big room, kind of completely non-pretentiously called the Great Hall. And we got this Great Hall for a couple of days, and we managed to get close to 400 people through the experience, which was a challenge, but really, really nice. And the funny thing is that the groups that succeeded, they did this in completely different ways. So there's no single strategy that makes kind of your group integrated. There's a million different ways of doing this. A million is a figurative, thing. Not generally a million. We haven't calculated it. But there are several strategies that failed miserably. And 2 of the ones that failed actually was very funny, because the 2 security guards in the place actually got kind of interested, and they wanted to, of course, we can let them come and take part in the experiment. And what they did is they started very assertively bossing people around and telling people how to move, and then you do this, and then you do the other thing, and then we move that way. Failed miserably, completely. Which was amusing, shall we say. So that was a fun observation, actually. We don't know what works, but we definitely know what doesn't work.
It's very interesting if we apply it to the society, because what is coming from it is control doesn't work, which we can actually also see with the psychoactive substances, and prohibition and all this, and then celebrating diversity, and to have understanding one for another. And on the other hand, we have all these idols and a lot of people trying to be like them. But very, very nice to apply it. But there is a second thing that failed, no? You said there
the other security guard.
Sure. Okay.
But yeah, anyways, I'm afraid we may have strayed a little bit, from the topic of psychedelics and consciousness. So,
But thank you for sharing this. Yeah. So Lisa, you did a design of a clinical study of extended intravenous DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine, for those who may don't know, and which is one of the most potent psychedelic in the world. How did you come to, or ended up to actually design this, or having an interest in this?
Yeah, so I have to say the idea around extending the DMT experience has been around probably longer than I've been in the psychedelic field. So, I think there was one study who already actually gave an extended infusion of DMT, I think in the early 2000s maybe. And then there was another paper published, I think 2016, around sort of, how can we maybe extend the experience given based on the kind of the properties that DMT exhibits, which is, I guess, maybe I can explain here. It's a very short-acting psychedelic as opposed to, like, for example, psilocybin or LSD. It's usually only active for maybe 20 minutes, with the peak being around maybe 2 to 5 minutes if you inhale it or if you give it intravenously. And then you also have ayahuasca, which is kind of DMT mixed with another substance, and then that's, I think, maybe 4 to 6 hours, but that's kind of different. And then what you also see with DMT is that you can give repeated doses without seeing any sort of tolerance, which we don't have with magic mushrooms or LSD, where, if you take LSD one day and then you want to do it again tomorrow, that kind of doesn't work. So, researchers already came up with this idea of maybe we can use DMT and create a longer experience. I think it was 2016. And then we were just the first team to sort of really come up with a method of how we're going to do this. So our approach was to use plasma data from previous studies. We had, I think, at that point, 2 previous studies with DMT where we had plasma concentration data, and then we gave that to colleagues in Sweden who came up with this model that we can use with the goal of sort of extending the infusion over half an hour and sustaining the peak effects of DMT. So that's kind of the backstory of how we started this. And then I sort of came in somewhere in the middle. I have a background in psychology, but I was always really interested in psychedelics, and then sort of like I'm kind of sitting in the middle in between sort of like clinical psychology and neuroscience in a way. Yeah.
I would actually ask what were the risk factors or obstacles that are related to prolonging the DMT state?
Yeah, so I think from what we knew is that DMT has very low toxicity. I think one thing that we were aware of is that with DMT you see a kind of spike in heart rate, but that kind of with normal, let's say normal, not extended DMT injections or smoking, that usually goes away. So that was definitely something that we were monitoring in the beginning. And then also because, we hadn't done it before, what we did is we started with very low doses, so doses that would give you kind of like an almost nodding experience, and then sort of worked our way up. Whenever we saw that, people tolerated it well, we would increase the dose and then sort of just see what we find, just to be cautious, yeah. And then also doing this in experienced volunteers. So everyone who we invited was experienced with psychedelics, and then also specifically with DMT, and then healthy volunteers, yeah.
That's amazing. Last week I got to hang out with Jack Aloka in Montreal. Some of you may have heard about. And Jack was sharing some of the experience. Not everyone went through all of these increases, right? So what were the dosages? How long did it last? How long was prolonged the peak? What were the reasons that people decided not to go through to another session?
Okay, so let me start with maybe, wait, that was a lot of questions. I'm going to just start somewhere.
How many volunteers?
How many? Yeah, so basically we had 2 studies. The first one was called a dose response study. So basically the goal of that was to really, look at this infusion model that we had and sort of see whether what we're predicting actually translates into what we see, and then also to see how people respond to different doses of different intensities. And then that was the first study. That was only 11 people who came back repeatedly, so they had one placebo session and then up to 4 different DMT sessions. And then the second part of the study was what we called a high-dose imaging study. So we gave a high dose of DMT, continuous infusion, and then we were sort of focusing on looking at the brain, getting EEG data, and then really trying to see what happens in the brain, and also subjectively to people who are under the effects of this continuous DMT infusion. And then so the reason why some people got multiple doses and then other people only got one is mostly due to them either being in the first arm of the study or the second arm. And then I think we did have some people who decided not to come back for higher doses. And, I think one person, I think I can share this, one person was just very satisfied with the first dose they got, and then they cited, if you get the message, hang up the phone. And then I think there was also someone who kind of just didn't want to come back to more doses. They had 2. There were also people who wanted to have more doses, but then our protocol only allowed for 4. So yeah, there was a bit of everything, and then with a lot of kind of piecing it all together, we ended up with this sample of 11 people who had maybe in total, maybe 40 doses in total between them. Yeah.
Nice. Now, DMT can be a quite wild experience. People can dance around, they can be moving a lot, they can be, do thrashing, spasming, maybe a little bit, just generally being out there. Now, can you describe what was happening here? Because they were in a very particular situation.
Yeah, so definitely. With DMT, what you see is, sometimes people, they feel like they move, they have to move a lot, or also I think with the physical effects, it's just, it just happens that you breathe deeper, maybe you tense up a bit, so all of these things. And then, of course, because they were in our study and we were collecting EEG data, which is quite sensitive to noise, and then we had to manage sort of, on the one hand, wanting to get as good of quality of data as possible, but then also being aware that they're going into this kind of vulnerable situation where they might feel like in order to be comfortable they do need to move. So what we kind of did to sort of combine these two things in the best possible way is to get people who are experienced, and then also I guess what happened sort of in our favor is that most of the people who came to us because they were interested in DMT and its effects, but then also wanting to help in science. So there was a kind of a willingness to sort of cooperate and then sort of also understand what we need from them. And then at the end of the day, I think what we always did is we always kind of went with the principle of their safety and comfort being the most important thing, and then just sort of reminding them that of course we would like you to stay still, but your comfort is the most important, and then we're going to just do the science sort of around you.
Let me reiterate. So for their comfort, they were on an IV drip.
Yeah.
They had electrodes on their chest.
Yeah.
They had full helmet on with all the cables. Yeah. What else was there?
So they were wearing, it's called a high density EEG set. So it's 256 channels. It looks like a helmet that you wear if you want to go into battle in the 1800s. And then they did have 2 cannulations actually. One of them was to get the DMT infusion in, and then the other one was actually to get blood samples, because we were also interested in further refining the model that we have. What else did they have? I think that was it. So there was a bit of restriction, and then that's also why we went with experienced volunteers as well. So it's not, everything is completely new. At least there's one thing that they kind of know and are familiar with. Yeah.
So I wonder, there is a different depth of psychedelic experience you can have with DMT, and I wonder if they kept conscious about their body, or if actually sometimes it happens that I know it more from like the smoking experience, that people leave their body and it's out of body experience when you are actually not aware of your body. So then many things can happen. So was there this kind of loss of awareness of the body, or the fact that it goes smooth with the intravenous? Is it smoother, and is it then continuous experience when you are aware of the body all the time?
Yeah, I think there's always this thing that you described of people kind of losing sense of their body, and it's actually one of the questions that we do ask them after their experience, and they're supposed to rate, like, over time, how much did you lose awareness of your body here and there and there. I think in our study, I think it happened, maybe I would say, less than in other studies, or maybe a bit less than maybe we expected. And I think the reason for that might be that we were also, during their experience, collecting data, basically asking them every couple of minutes to rate certain things. So every couple of minutes, we would check in and be like, hey, how intense is your experience right now? And then, of course, like, if you have that happening, probably you're going to remain in your body a bit more, as opposed to like a situation where you just have an uninterrupted experience.
So if we look at it from the perspective of psychedelic experience and what we know, so the set is that they were experienced psychonauts, maybe going for this science, and I would be interested to know their own intention, if they're actually, and it was healthy volunteers, so not really people dealing with some mental health issues, so I would be wondering of what was their intention. The setting was kind of difficult, no? Like being connected with all the machines and technology and to collect data. And then the dose. So was the experience profound for the people, and did the intention actually were their intentions fulfilled?
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. It's a bit of a difficult setting that they're in. It's also, on top of being connected to everything, all of this is also happening in a hospital, in a research hospital in Western London. What we do is we try to decorate the room as nicely as possible, but in a clinical research setting, you can never achieve what you can achieve, for example, in a ceremony or in field studies. So there's definitely a bit of there's a limit to what you can do. In terms of their intentions, yes, because they were all healthy volunteers, I think. We did also ask them every morning before their dose what their intentions are, as much as they want to share with us. And quite a lot was just around sort of, exploring and, seeing what will happen, because they were trying such a new thing. And then I think for many people it was just a general openness. I don't remember anyone saying anything very specific around their intentions. I think for some of the people who came back multiple times, one intention was actually to try and understand how to navigate the space, or maybe, on subsequent dosing sessions, maybe wanting to bring maybe more of this attitude or that attitude to the experience, but it was usually quite open. In terms of the profundity, I was actually surprised that for people, it did seem like they had profound or meaningful experiences. And, with DMT, I think it's quite an interesting experience. It doesn't always make much sense. It's very colorful, very immersive, very intense for a very short period of time. So, usually people struggle with making sense of what is happening. And then I think what we saw in this extended infusion version is that over time, as people adapt to the state that they're in, there is maybe a bit more space for them to make sense of what is happening. And I would maybe I would think that that allows them to find some sort of meaning in the experience. But then, of course, we also do have data on that, but we haven't looked at it yet. So I think this is just my speculation around that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that. Just listening to you and you both, in fact, this thought started rising in me. Maybe you can correct me. So, these people were in a setting, and you were asking them questions. You said that probably kept them in their body mode. There wasn't this full release, out-of-body experience. They kept more in control. Yeah. Then we've also heard that if you try to be in control, that is very redundant. And we also know that if you try to be in control too much, that becomes pathological. Then we start having the stress disorders, we start maybe having the ruminative thoughts, depression, these maladaptive reactions of body and mind. Yeah, I see a theme here. I don't know what you guys think.
I like it.
Yeah, it's all about sort of being in the middle of two extremes, I guess.
Yeah, that sometimes you need, what is the opposite of control, right? And in this setting, I imagine that's something like surrender. Surrender to the experience where you can explore new things, right? What is the surrender if you're at work? You know, maybe you're trying to figure out a problem, then you need to surrender to the problem to figure out a new way. You have to stop being stressed in order to find a way to solve it, perhaps. Right? I don't know if I see this in some sort of data analysis point of view.
So from the physics point of view, at least, the opposite of control perhaps would be called self-organization.
Beautiful.
Right? Where, whenever you have a system where each one of the parts kind of just knows what to do from what is happening around it.
Means being completely present, no? Here and now?
Plausibly. I mean, many things are self-organized, right? Like, I don't know, droplets of water in a cloud, for example, they self-organize in some particular way. I wouldn't say they are present. But what we can perhaps say is that when neurons in the brain self-organize in particular ways, then you are present. Okay. Right? That is something I am marginally more confident in saying. But yeah, maybe that is something that can actually be linked. So, for example, one thing that I'm not so familiar with is what are the kind of neural mechanisms of psychological resistance. Right? We also know that psychological resistance plays a huge part in a psychedelic experience. I don't actually know if psychological resistance is a kind of localized thing, like your prefrontal cortex is saying no, and then that is kind of putting the brakes on everything else. I'm sure there must be research around. I just don't know it myself.
It sounds to me, and I don't. You probably can tell more about this, like a predictive coding theory. And if you have very set priors, and I see this with our patients in a psyched study, if they come with an already very established and strong opinion about the worldview, how world should be, what they should be doing, how they should be behaving, then we have very hard times to have them open up to the experience and actually benefit from it. Mm-hmm. And from the point of view of the predictive coding theory, and we can talk maybe a little bit about the entropic brain, all that stems from it. There's such a thing called as a prior, my prior belief. And in fact, every our interaction is influenced by our priors. If I turn now to Lisa, my prior is that she's going to respond to me. If my prior was that she's not going to talk to me, I'm not even going to ask the question, right? And this is very much relationship-based. If I think my father is not going to talk to me, I'm not going to tell him about my problems, etc. This is, we can see where this is going in a family therapy, in the relationships. Back to the topic. Predictive coding, strong prior, strong belief about the situation in the world. Sorry, I wanted to pass the word. How does that relate to the theories of consciousness, psychedelic experience control?
That's a very good question. I mean, but I was now very intrigued by this topic of, do you think that these kind of strong priors that dictate what we expect, or that dictate our actions and our relationships, could those be enacting this psychological resistance inside your brain? Sounds plausible.
Is this something that you can measure? Is this something that you can look as a sort of a predictor?
It's a tricky one. It's a very tricky one. So this, I mean, maybe I don't know. Shall we say a few words about this predictive processing business, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Lisa, would you like to?
I would like to pass it on to you.
Okay, fine. So this predictive processing, maybe just to give a little bit of context on this. I mean, I'm guessing that probably some of us in the room know, but this is a basic idea that says that everything that's going on in your brain is actually, again, some sort of I don't want to say competition. It's an interaction between two different kind of types of information that flow around in your brain. One is the kind of perceptual information of what you're actually sensing and perceiving and seeing. And the other one is this thing called the prior, which is basically what your brain thinks is going to happen, right? And your brain is constantly trying to make these predictions about whatever is going to happen next. And then the actual, neural activity that happens in your brain is the interaction between these kind of predictions and then the extent to which they match or not match what is actually kind of getting to your brain through your eyes and your senses and everything. Why was I getting onto this? Psychological resistance, priors, consciousness. What is the question?
Well, but sounds like something that is going on a therapy. When one goes to the therapy, we are trying to kind of dig into this primal preset of ourselves that is then influencing the ways how we move in the life and what is happening to us and how do we attach to it and how do we relate to it and all this.
And how can we measure these priors to fit them in a model?
That was it. Very good one. I don't know, actually. That's an issue with theories, right? That if you stick an electrode into a brain, you don't see priors running around, right? You see volts, and then it actually takes quite a leap of imagination to go from volts to priors. So there are ways in which we can think about, or we can, describe brain activity as, priors being here or there, but it actually gets a bit imaginative at some point.
So are we tapping into like neuroplasticity?
Definitely neuroplasticity has a lot to do with this. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Not that I would know much about it.
Neither would I, but yeah.
Can I ask something? So you asked how to measure the priors, right? So theoretically, there are areas in the brain that we can say with a little bit more confidence that they relate to memory, so that would be a little bit more in the priors, and maybe the areas that are more connected to the sensory information would be more like the posteriors. How do you call the others?
Likelihood.
So wouldn't that a little bit correlate, for example, in EEGs or fMRI studies, that you would see if somebody has very strong priors, so you would see maybe stronger activation in the areas that relate to memory and stuff?
Plausibly.
I love this. I saw a paper that identified 128 types of memory across the whole brain.
Nice. Power of two.
Huh?
No, I was just saying it's a power of two.
Yeah, there we go.
There's also, there was, I think, a few years ago, a paper by Professor Wollensfrieder, I think, from Switzerland. Maybe I talked about it with Marek sometime, when he showed that psychedelics relax the priors. So maybe there is like people with strong priors have a harder time. They give a bigger fight to the substance, so the psychological process becomes more difficult in the experience.
Another question is, can we localize these areas in the brain? Can we measure the activity and then assume that this activity are these priors? Yeah. Tomorrow we have a talk with Franz. I'm very much looking forward to that. And what you refer to is the relaxed beliefs on the psychedelics. I wasn't, yeah. Okay. Yeah, pure magic. I love it. fMRI, Rebus. Elisa, maybe that's more from your department.
Yeah. Yeah, Rebus. I don't know what to say about that. Other than, it's like pure magic. How do we test it?
the way I've come to think about things like predictive coding and rebus, and rebus is different. The way I've come to think about predictive coding is actually that it's not really a theory in the sense that it's not a theory you test. It's a language you speak in, right? So you can describe lots and lots of things in the idea of, priors and beliefs and, making sense of the world in the light of these priors and whatever. You can do that with, pretty much anything. The question is that language of description actually helpful? Right? And for example, in certain therapy contexts, yes, it definitely is. Right? I could also go in a therapy context and say, but you see, this particular brain region happened to be 10 millivolts, more active than it should have been. Therefore, you have to make it 10 millivolts less, please. And maybe that's actually scientifically accurate, but it's not a useful language to talk about. So the way I think about this kind of predictive processing idea is just that it's a language, and to the extent that it allows us to, write explanations that are shorter, more convenient, more accessible to us, or ultimately more helpful towards actually improving people's experience, then it's a good language to use.
If I may, I would actually go back to the surrendering, to that question, and I wonder, you have a lot of experience from the field and from measuring people in different festival spaces while they were doing, I think also DMT, but psychedelics on this recreational kind of context. So what would you say? Like, I'm actually interested to hear about it, but also what would you say about their ability to surrender? Because I think it was for the people in the clinical study, it was much harder to surrender if every few minutes you are actually questioning something. But I guess were you also collecting data this way, or just measuring the EEG, or can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, I was kind of not directing the conversation there, so thank you for that. I see the fascinating, we have the data analysis, then we have a super hardcore clinical study, and then we're out there in the field with a bunch of toys and measuring some of the most profound experiences that people report back to us. That is transformational festivals. What was happening, we went with Lisa's boss, Chris Timmerman, to a Boom Festival and a study approved by Imperial College London that was last summer. Brought the laboratory level EEG equipment. Just to mention, the activity in the brain has to be amplified 1 million times in order for us to be able to measure it and distinguish some patterns at all. So we're bringing this kind of a stuff to a big boom boom over there, DJ partying, lasers, people taking absolutely everything possible. And then we had t-shirts, "Can I scan your brain on the MT?" And people at first thought this was a joke. We put a little tarp on the beach, just some pillows. And then slowly the word got around, and eventually actually a lot of people was interested in getting their brain scanned on. So absolutely uncontrolled, These people are dehydrated, they've been partying for several days, taking plethora of definitely not the healthiest of stuff, maybe, in some cases, let's say. Just to say, Boom Festival has now the highest use of cocaine, which makes me very sad. But yeah, that turned from a hippie festival a different direction. Anyway, so we are interested in psychedelics. We're very particularly interested in DMT. We are not providing the experience. We are not sitting the experience. We can only be there if it's done in a shamanistic sort of a setting. Some people had this kind of a setup at a festival that maybe they would have a friend shaman who's gonna take them through the experience. I was like, okay, let's do it. So we plug a 64-channel high-density EEG cap on them. We have these beautiful amplifiers from Ant Neuro, which is right now top-of-the-shelf EEG from my perspective anyway. It was surviving horrendous conditions. This is laboratory equipment, again, 1,000 times. We have to amplify it 45 degrees during the day. Everyone's sweaty. Crazy stuff. And so we plug them in. We do a baseline recording to know what's the activity. baseline recording again of people who've been tripping for several days. Like, yes, and then they like. We're still tripping. No. In many cases, and then they come and they're like, "Man, this is Changa," and we go like, "What is Changa?" We're like, well, "I don't know. That guy over there sold it." All right, this is gonna be. How are we gonna go about this? Never mind. Let's record this. So baseline recording. Then they hit the pipe or do whatever administration they want. Usually the people just kind of fall back, lie down. We did ask them to try to be as quiet as possible for the reasons you mentioned. If they trash around too much, the activity from the muscles is too strong. It basically overshadows all the brain activity. Yeah, then 20 minutes later, they do come out of it, a different person. Like, yeah, this was great. Can we do it again? Or like, no, one is enough. We do another recording at the end to ask them a bunch of questionnaires. Victoria, actually, from Imperial Lab was recently presenting that. I missed the presentation, unfortunately. And we've analyzed or pre-analyzed the EEG data.
How many people turn on?
The surviving sample without, I think, is maybe 18 people that we can do. So in 1 week, we managed to do basically like a sample of a clinical trial at the festival.
So 80 or 18?
18, 1-8. We had much more. Unfortunately, there was a lot of things that went wrong. Also, the machines were not happy. It was a big learning curve of things, and so we're gonna repeat it. Even better. 128 electrodes. Yeah. So there's already a next stage planned for roughly in a month's time. That was cool. It was cool to sit through so many experiences, see the variety of experiences. Was absolutely fantastic. But that was kind of like, for me, a test way. What happened in the past 2 weeks was, from my perspective, much more interesting. So I'm going to share a little bit of that in a study approved by University Maastricht Hospital under the lead of Jack Aloka and Dr. Malin Uthak. Amazing people. We flew to Montreal, where a facilitator administrates intramuscularly 5-meo-DMT. So it's a substance that's very fast-acting, very potent, one of the most potent. Oftentimes people describe it as a different ball game from other psychedelics. And so here we are. We have all our EEGs packed, going through the customs like, these are just toys, no problem. We arrived there, we have this amazing facilitator he gave me. So I try to be scientific, but for the past couple of weeks, I was really immersed into the personal experience of it. And that's maybe where this becomes interesting. Because, again, we try as naturalistic as possible. We're in a facilitator's home. The people have electrodes on the fingers for galvanic response. They have electrodes on their chest for the heartbeat. They have breathing belts, and they have a 64-channel cap. So this is pretty much, they're very much hooked up. We have 2 engineers present, myself and another colleague. One is responsible for the data management. The other one is unplug fail-safe switch. If things go wrong, unplug everything as fast as possible. 5-meo-DMT naturalistic study. People trash around. People maybe want to vomit. They want to dance. They want to just do all sorts. And we want it to be as naturalistic as possible. So I'm sitting next to the machines, just. Why am I mentioning this? The profoundness of the experience for me was watching the work of the facilitator. And I never understood, why do we have these neo-shamans? What is the difference between a facilitator and a shaman? We have shamans, we have this technology already implemented. The difference there was that shaman doesn't need to know you. That you can come to a ceremony, you're connected with him on some level, and then he takes care of you in the transpersonal, in the medicinal space. Well, this facilitator was getting very personal with the people. He was getting personalized everything. It was like a adapted technology from Bufo alvarius or Encelius alvarius in a setting where now it's being given intramuscularly, and that goes with a therapy session months before and months after. This was really cool. Now, intramuscular 5-meo-DMT doesn't last 20 minutes. It can last up to 1.5 hours. This was crazy. in 5 minutes, these people were reaching peak, and they were lasting in a peak for anywhere between 20 to 45 minutes, and they're coming down.
How many times did you have to unplug?
3?
3 out of?
3 out of 16.
And I guess with 5-MeO-DMT, it is more usual that people actually go out of body, no? That they lose the sense of body. So did they all did? Because when you smoke it, I barely know.
And this, we had a big chat about this with a facilitator, amazing guy. I hope we can invite him for a talk here. There is a difference between submission and surrender. And it's something we spoke about, and that he explained to me, and I'm not entirely certain I fully understand. In a submission framework, you overwhelm the system. You give a high dose that you completely shoots you out of the body. There was a lot of damage done with this, even in Czech Republic. There were some shamans visiting, maybe some of you have heard, people who traumatized by the strength of the experience itself. On the other hand, some people want this. They want to be unplugged so strongly that they think this is the only way. The way this facilitator work with the people, and where I see like this precision psychiatry, really like person-centered and person-focused, is to work with the surrender to the experience. Something that we let go of the control, that you don't have to stay out in the body, that you're in a setting where you allow yourself to let go. And for example, the facilitator spoke about an analogy, like if you're in an elevator and you want to get to the top floor of the body experience, and you can't get there. Well, either you need a stronger elevator, and that's the 5-mile gang from Mexico. Let's give you as much as possible. Let's get to the elevator. We're gonna take you not only to the top floor, but to the space. Or you need to bring less to the elevator. You need to drop some of the weight yourself. You need to surrender to the experience. And this was fantastic. The guy had a lot of experience with the sort of inhalation, small amounts, slowly increasing, so that the people managed to always check up with him, tell him if they want to go deeper, take something to surrender to the experience. With the 5-mil, you cannot go in and out. This is much more difficult, and intramuscular, I mean. So he had to actually sort of gauge himself, the dosage, but the preparation he was doing with people, the way he managed to connect with them, and then allow them to open up to the space himself was fascinating. And so he was achieving full releases, that's how he was calling it, or breakthroughs, that maybe we would call it out-of-body experience, with much smaller doses that would otherwise be necessary, because the people could open to the experience. And I had a chance to interview a guy that was in your DMT extended study, DMTX, and he said that he never achieved that intensity in this crazy 2 cannulas in a hospital as he did in the setting in Montreal a couple of weeks back. And then, it was fantastic to see. He was fully spasmic, moving, this guy. And then we spoke with the facilitator, how much did you give him? And it was half of what it would have to be potentially if we look at clinical data, because he managed to open up to the experience. This was very powerful to me. I think if psychedelics are understood in this way, much more that to not overwhelm the system, but in fact make more sensitivity and more space for what is to come, we will have massive harm reduction. At festivals, in a home setting, we will achieve more, in fact, and you can bring more in. And it's not that you have to stay there and take notes through the experience. It's not that you are there. No, the 5-mil takes you away. It's a powerful molecule, and the I stops existing. There's no one to take notes, no one that's learning from it consciously. It happens in the medicinal space, but it happens with the neural system sensitive to it and open to it, with the I open to it. Well, yeah, sorry, I'm just very full of this experience.
I wonder if it was only, not only, but EEG data collecting, or also some other questionnaires, because I believe that we will have a very interesting data to look at regarding the therapy of the people and how it actually moved them in their lives.
Yes, we have a bunch of standardized questionnaires. We have the ego dissolution questionnaire, we have the mystical experience questionnaire, the 5 dimensions of altered states of consciousness questionnaire. And we work with these a lot. We work with these even in clinical trials that we're doing here in Prague. We ask people these questions. We try to correlate with the experience. What we see that these substances seem to be very similar in these questionnaires. They appear like almost identical. I'll have the lines. I could show you the graphs some other time. We have the LSD and mushroom almost identical. We have the DMT, ayahuasca, very similar to each other. Well, that is not the reality of it. This, from my experience, each experience is very different, and then each substance is very different. So I'm a bit worried about the questionnaires that they're not telling us the right information, and we're now thinking of maybe developing some questionnaire specifically aimed at the 5-meo experience in cooperation with facilitators worldwide, people who have a lot of experience in our Western world kind of weird society, and in cooperation with the people as well. Like, does this question make sense to you? And what else would you describe about your experience? To make a standardized way that doesn't have 97 questions as some other questions, but is reasonably long, that can actually convey the aspects of the experience that are important for us being able to maybe then direct in a kind of clinical setting and be able to select between the participants for whom psychedelics would work in therapy and for whom they wouldn't.
But wouldn't it make sense to make a questionnaire that you would actually give to people before, right after, and then with a longer period of time? Like maybe something like what have you been aware of before than what appeared in the experience itself, and then what actually moved through the integration time? What became more clear in the life that needed a change?
Yeah, totally. Maybe you can be part of the discussion as well and throw in your insights. Right now, we don't have a standardized way of doing this. And problem with question is not only that we ask questions, but then we need to ask this question to 10,000 people to get some distributions, because we see that these things change with age, they change with gender, weight, there's a different demographics. Language plays a massive role. Language definitely formulates our experience, even the psychedelic experience. If you ask an indigenous person from Quechua tribe in Ecuador, you get a totally different description of ayahuasca than if you ask myself or someone in this room. So all these things need to be taken in account before we can use this question reliably.
Wow.
Yeah. That is such a huge topic also, like not only in kind of psychedelic neuroscience, but in consciousness neuroscience more generally, right? Like how do we establish a common language to talk about our kind of first person experience? And I don't think we have an answer, actually. But one topic I've been thinking about recently is taking some inspiration. It's not something that I've actually done, just thinking, which is of course very cheap. But taking some inspiration from what people do in food science, actually. So in food science, of course, it's developing flavors and developing products is of course a huge industry with lots of very established protocols, and they have this sort of flavor panels, right? So if a company wants to develop a product, they'll have a few different kind of versions of it, and they'll give them to a panel for them to say, oh, is this, how does it taste? And it's actually not miles away from, these kind of consciousness questionnaires, right? Like, to what extent is it bitter? What do you feel the bitterness? And does the bitterness come before or after this thing? And one thing they do, they put great effort in these kind of flavor panels is actually training people to be accurate reporters of their own experience. And they go to great lengths to do this, right? And they have, it's a different context, but they would train people a lot. And they would say, oh, and this is crispy, and this is crunchy. And crunchy is not crispy because the difference is blah, blah, right? And they do this over and over with a kind of pretty large pool of people that are picked to be very diverse in particular ways, right? And they train these kind of expert kind of tasters, really. So I've been actually wondering, perhaps we should do the same in consciousness and have like expert introspectors.
I love this where you're going with this expert psychedelic tasters.
But I think that in the East, where the altered states of ecstatic states of consciousness, also in the First Nations, they have much broader vocabulary describing the different states of the consciousness. So maybe we can also get inspired over there. And it's interesting that you use the food, because few months ago I've been in a discussion with some of the people from ICS, and they've been talking about how eventually maybe one day we implement ayahuasca or even psychedelics into the context out of the clinical, and they were using the metaphor of restaurants. That if we look at it from the point of view of what should be preserved or preset from the state, from the government, like from the law, then there is certain safety, hygiene, but then you choose the design, you choose the chef. Also, if people don't like how the chef is cooking, they change the restaurant. If he poisons them, then he is the one who is responsible for it. So there is actually quite some stuff we can look.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I think that we are slowly getting to the time to hear some questions from the public.
It was interesting to talk about, a while back you mentioned language, right? And then when you talk about control, you said opposite of control being self-organization from physics point of view, which is kind of like an internal locus of control, right? And then you said opposite of control being, at that point I think you said surrender, which is and then which is more of surrendering to an external locus of control, right? And then later you said submission and surrender, and kind of the difference. And where my mind went was surrender being agreeing to let go to an external locus of control, whereas submission kind of being, it's going to happen no matter what, it's out of my control that I'm going to let go of control, And all this got really interesting to me because I was thinking about reading some stuff in the past about actually shibari, rope tying, as actually a therapeutic modality, and at this certain point of release, right? And where I'm going with this element of control, because you start talking about psychological resistance, right? Which at its basis is some sort of resistance or denial or push away from truth in some sort, some inner or deeper truth that we're resisting, right? That we don't want to become aware of or we don't want to feel, or something that's kind of there but we're resisting a knowledge or something, right? And so as this relates to the entire discussion, and Lisa especially maybe, there's been some research on, for instance, a primary psychedelic experience from a therapeutic healing modality that's a guided, right? And using a DMT or ketamine or something. But then at the same time adding a little bit of something like an MDMA, which reduces the fear response, right? And then they're more open to the actual experience and the therapeutic guide at that point in time, right? So that was kind of all interesting to me of using an MDMA as an example to kind of reduce a fear response, which would be a reduce of resistance, if you want to look at it that way, so that they could open up more to the experiences and what might be more widely available there, right? So that's all interesting to me. Now, my question to all this, which goes a little bit deeper, it's a little bit philosophical and psychological and spiritual, is, widely thought that true pathological narcissistic personality disorder, full-blown, is fairly untreatable. And the reason being, in a kind of conceptual sense, is that the narcissistic structure is so deeply defined that literally to show that person or bring them back to a sense of reality, the reality that they would have to hit would literally be like a suicide. Because the false self has to die to go back to the real self, right? So as I was thinking of that, and thinking about psychological resistance as something maybe one of the hardest situations to possibly treat, which commonly thought of as nearly impossible, through a reduction of fear of meeting the self and the shame that comes with that, such as with an MDMA response a little bit, right? And then reducing psychological resistance at that point, do we have maybe additional treatment modalities for these deeper disorders like that, that futuristically might be treatable with a new modality of that, and through the neuroplasticity and everything else. So that's my question in a nutshell. and what everybody might think about that from, and I'm curious if you've ever seen EEG data of when somebody's in psychological resistance, do you see an EEG area light up? Has that ever, do you know any measurement of that?
We found some indication, perhaps. I don't have any kind of very, tight conclusions.
I was just curious, if you'd seen that or come across that. Okay. And then I'd just be curious, at least then, would you think of more from a psychological point of, from the psychological point of view and let's see, a chemical point of view as well, from a deeper philosophical level of kind of treating these supposedly untreatable conditions as we reduce fear and psychological resistance. What do you think about that?
Thanks, Lisa. It's very interesting things. There's a lot of things there. So, to my point of view, now we have a system that's very stuck, right? That's what you discussed. Then we need a hammer to break it, which could cause the suicide that you mentioned. Where am I going with this?
Right, because sorry to add to that, borderline personality disorder typically has higher rates of attempted suicide. But a lot of people don't know is narcissism actually has high rates of successful suicide. Right.
It's difficult, right? We don't want to suggest to anyone to start poisoning narcissistic people's drinks with psychedelics. The most honest answer is that we don't know. We can presume that psychedelics may offer novel treatments to these things. There is some anecdotal data that psycholytic therapy was successfully used, even in Czech Republic at Sacka, until relatively recently, until the 90s, for treatment of forms of schizophrenia, which could be somewhat relatable to this. At the same time, I'm very wary of saying that psychedelics are like the magic pill for treatment of everything. We just simply don't know, and especially if we go into some of the neurobiology of the psychopathology of the psychopathy, as you described. What if there is simply something that didn't develop properly? That we cannot. That there's nothing to fix for us because maybe in the brain a certain structure or functioning is missing, right? So, I don't know. But thanks for summarizing and bringing all of these points together. It's very interesting. Do you guys want to add something?
I don't have much to add. Maybe I can maybe add two things. I definitely agree with the usefulness of combining a classic psychedelic with MDMA for therapy purposes. I would say that, I agree with Marek that in controlled clinical studies, I think there is a lot of caution around bringing these, let's say, more difficult to treat populations into the studies for reasons like, suicide attempts, all of those things. So, I think, I agree. There's just not really much data on, whether it would be useful. And then also, psychedelics are not the cure-all of everything. I guess what I want to also maybe add is that, there's also a lot of underground work. And my guess is that probably there's quite a lot of knowledge in that world that we are not aware of. But those people have been doing lots of work for a very, very long time. So I think, probably someone from that world would be more able to answer your question.
Very good, thank you.
There's one right behind you if you want to pass the mic.
Thank you. I wanted to ask this question. I've been really excited to ask this for a long time because it's been just laying in my head. And because you talked about a lot and conducted studies, including EEG, I am interested if there was a study already on people not really with mental illnesses, but more specifically neurodivergent people, something that is observable through these technologies. If there has been something done like this, or if there is an output, or if these people could actually benefit from something like this, is it possible?
I'm not aware of actually any studies on neurodivergent populations as the main sample, but I think you're touching on something that is very important in the psychedelic research space right now, which is that Our samples are very homogeneous, so you have clinical studies on people with certain disorders, let's say, and then you have healthy volunteer studies, and those studies, from what I'm aware of, are usually very homogeneous. So if you look at gender, age, if you look at socioeconomic status, and let's say race, neurodivergence as well, you don't really get a lot of representation. It's usually quite a small variance. So definitely there's a big need for that to be improved in different ways, including studying, having more studies with also people with neurodivergence, for example. Yeah.
To this, I would like to add, in the study that we had last week, we were completely dislodged from the process of inviting participants, so that was naturalistic. We had the usual white, rich males, but we had quite a bit of females. We had Asians from China, from Japan. We had First Nations from Canada. That was amazing. Mexican, yeah, it was a whole variety. So for considering it was 16 people, there was not a majority. It was very distributed. I have a problem with the word neurodivergence. Maybe we can catch up on that, because I don't know what is a neuroconvergence.
Neurotypical.
Yeah, show me that on a paper. Show me the EEGs of a neurotypical person. I was looking at 16 people's EEGs. They were all different just recently. That's my latest experience. Neurotypical, I guess I understand what you want to say, but I am not able to see that in the waves, which is what I see when I have the EEGs.
Isn't it? Maybe I'm wrong. Just correct me. But if I thought that it was observable, specifically, maybe if we talk about autism, for example, is it observable? Especially, is it distinguishable from neurotypicals, people who don't have such thing?
Yeah.
So,
thanks for that. And with autism specifically, the EEG is not the most reliable. In fact, right now, as I'm aware, and we were in a lab of Guillaume Dumas in Montreal as well, if maybe you remember, amazing guy. Anyway, lab of Professor Torres is they can now very reliably distinguish autism from baby movements. They put a camera on top of a baby, see how the baby moves. So not the brain. In the brain, we can't see it. And a psychologist can distinguish autism at the age of 4, 5. It's if it's severe. If it's not severe, that at the age of 16, maybe. But from the movements of the baby, they can now, with the machine learning models, distinguish, as I don't know what was she saying, like basically as soon as the baby is born with some reliability, and at the 9 months, the reliability was already solid, like 97% in their study, and that was not replicated yet. So again, that tells me more about that autism is somehow embodied. It's in the body as a whole, in the whole neural system, rather than focusing on just the mesh between the ears.
okay, thank you.
Thanks for your talk. It's very nice. Lisa, I have a question about, I heard that there were some experiments going on with 2 people being dosed at the same time and trying to see if there's any telepathy happening.
Yeah.
Do you have any results from that?
Our famous telepathy study. Yeah, we do currently have a study running at Imperial, which is called hyperscanning. So basically, probably you might be better in explaining hyperscanning, but it's about sort of seeing in what way maybe people synchronize if they go into an experience at the same time, and this can be on levels like interpersonal, or also looking at the brain, whether there's something happening where some sort of brain measure synchronizes through the psychedelic experience that they're having together at the same time. In terms of hyperscanning.
Do you have any results?
No, so this is still ongoing. I think we're aiming for a sample of maybe 10 pairs. I think we're halfway through, so stay tuned, and then there will be more on that.
So at first, thanks for conducting the research. And I have a question for Lisa specifically. So what are the major interesting or practical implications or findings from the research?
I think Well, I guess the interest sort of, where you could take this is kind of twofold. One is really, just the interest in consciousness and understanding how it works and using DMT as a way to perturb usual consciousness and see what are the effects of that. So I think our main interest was really to, that route and sort of gathering more information with this extended experience, and then seeing, for example, we have the massive heart rate increase, and then also the brain changes in this way. But what happens when we extend the experience and then the heart normalizes? What do we see in the brain then? So it's kind of a big part of it is just that kind of curiosity of understanding more about human consciousness. In terms of clinical applications, if we ever get to a point where psychedelics become a medicine for, different disorders, let's say, I guess the idea is that, extended DMT is just, I guess, another one of those things that you couldn't put on the menu of your restaurant that you can offer to people. And then, just sort of, laying the groundwork of, opening those doors. And then, of course, there's much more work to be done in that area, things like how can you personalize the infusion more to different people, and then this is also, based on how do they react? How do different people react to the same dose? So yeah, there's also a lot of thinking in that space as well right now. Yeah.
Actually, sort of a follow-up question, maybe to practical uses. Lisa, you were involved in some study testing ayahuasca for conflict resolution and peace building.
Yeah. Yes, so that's Leo Roseman's study, one of my dear colleagues. I was involved in that study, I have to say, only in the data analysis process. So sort of, this was qualitative data, and then sort of looking at interviews of people having gone through the experience and then what came up for them, and then sort of finding themes of commonalities between different people. So that was my involvement in the study. I don't know whether you have a more specific question.
Were there any statistically significant positive results?
Well, so as far as I'm aware, this was more a qualitative study, so it's more about finding themes and less about significant numbers. But yeah, it's from what I remember, it's definitely a massive major study, and it's very important work. I don't really remember much about more specific significant results that I can point to, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Hope it
maybe you
works.
know more about
No, I would just mention that if I'm right, it was between Israeli and Palestinians. It was not set, so just to clarify on that.
Yeah.
My question is, I'm curious about endogenous DMT metabolism. We know about indole and methyltransferase, though the measurements show DMT levels are negligible in the body. However, there are questions. Do you have a take on it?
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
Do you have a take on it?
Do I have a take on it? I think my take on it, so basically the debate is around endogenous DMT. So what we give in studies, it's exogenous, and then there's also endogenous DMT, which exists in the human body in mammals, and then the debate is what the role of that DMT plays. And I guess my take on that is very agnostic. I feel like I don't have enough of the background to really make any sort of strong judgments, with my psychology degree. But it does seem like there are maybe experiments and tests that need to be carried out to give us more information around, what is actually happening in our body with endogenous DMT.
Yeah, I was also actually gonna ask this question about the fact whether DMT is actually building reality since it is endogenous also. Because I heard a statement in a podcast about this study, or maybe it was the study in 2016, I don't know. And that really piqued my interest, but you replied. And so I had a question for Pedro, if the study about the complexity, if actually the participants, if they were under influence of psychedelics, or if you tried to, or if they were sober, or if you had seen differences in results in the group behavior of the flashing head pieces.
Oh, if they had different complexity in the brain, or
no, the brain study that you, or the study that you did about the complexity of the organism, of the behaving people as organism, as the synchronicity thing. I don't know how you pronounce, how you spelled it. If they were actually under influence of psychedelics, or if they were sober.
No, they were not.
Because that would have been also interesting to see the difference there.
No, that would have been logistically complicated.
Next level.
Yes, exactly. That's for the next ethical review meeting, I believe. Yeah. Oh damn! Actually, anyway.
So, do we have more questions? Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for that interesting discussion. I was wondering, we talked a lot about altered state of consciousness, how psychedelics change our conscious states, but I was wondering if you have some maybe theoretical or empirical lessons about what psychedelics can tell us about the difference between conscious and unconscious processes.
I mean, it's hard to tell in the same degree as, how much you can, I guess, learn about football by playing basketball. Because they're different things, right? I mean, we do learn some basic features of brain organization, which are somewhat relevant. So, for example, we know that things like, the level of disorder, or the entropy of brain activity plays a very big role in these things. We develop a bunch of theories, but I think that translating insights from psychedelics to loss of consciousness, I would be very wary of this, because when we typically run psychedelic studies, we have a placebo arm and then a psychedelic arm, and both of them are conscious, right? So it becomes a bit difficult to draw very straightforward parallels. I mean, I wonder if anyone else has a different take on this.
Yeah, but maybe a little bit, because I've read your study on measuring the entropy of the brain in, for example, anesthesia, and compare that to the psychedelic state, for example, from the data we analyzed together. Do you want to share on that? How does the entropy changes? Maybe that tells us a little bit.
Yeah, so you can look at things like entropy, for example, like this level of disorder, and then you can say that, say, if you kind of put kind of healthy, resting, wakeful rest in the middle, then when you lose consciousness, you lose entropy. When you go on the psychedelic, you gain entropy, so to speak, and you can be very tempted to draw a line from one to the other, right? But the thing is that the brain varies, the dynamics of your brain vary across so many dimensions that it almost feels unfair to pick just, 3 conditions, 1 number, and say, aha, look, there's a line. So yeah, there are suggestive things we can try to do. Again, we can learn a lot about basic brain function and try to improve our models, improve our theories. But beyond some fairly limited comparisons, I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'll be kind of very keen to learn more, but I would exercise caution, I would say.
On some phenomenological level, one of the things that we're trying to achieve in psychedelic-assisted therapy or ketamine-assisted therapy is this, wow, aha moment. I've just realized this, and this was inaccessible to me before. This tells us that this somewhat new and maybe synergistic activity in the brain can shift perspective, can shift a point of view that allows you to look at your situations, past history, or perhaps your just ideas and imaginations from a different point of view, which brings out some sort of I don't want to say unconscious material because it becomes blurry, and I don't want to be dogmatistic about this. I don't necessarily follow that ideology. But it can definitely shift perspective. This is something that we assume is associated with the level of connections between different brain regions or their modularity. Well, I hope that satisfies.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, wouldn't be like a thermal heat death the highest entropic state to be reached?
Quite likely, yes. I mean, if
doesn't sound like an interesting conscious state to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you were in a kind of maximal entropy state, you would be a puddle on the floor at the moment. So, yeah, I don't think that maximal entropy is the one thing. That's again another one of these caveats of summarizing everything in a single real number. Yeah, I don't think maximal entropy always correlates with maximal consciousness, whatever that could possibly mean.
I wanted to ask if did any of the brain-scanned participants, to your knowledge, experience something what is called a bad trip? And if so, could you tell that just from looking at the data, without you knowing? Or were there anything else specific that you could tell just from looking at the data, not knowing what the participant went through?
Right, I can start here. I have one fun to start with. Like one of our participants at the festival last year came out of the experience saying, "Oh, I totally saw entities. They were observing me. They were all over my head." We're like, "Maybe that was us. We put a cap on your head." It's like, no. Don't worry, you guys were great. It was entities. So part of that. Can we distinguish? So we cannot distinguish much from just looking waves. Yeah, we're looking in EEG. We're measuring microvolts and their time series, their oscillation. It's like a sinus waves or sinus forms. And then we analyze it by breaking it into very specific sinus waves, which we think we understand. That is very difficult to match to any particular experience of one participant at any given time point. That's why we so far really do group analysis. So we give a bunch of people psychedelics, the other people placebo, and we pull the data together. Then we look at the differences, which hopefully localizes on certain areas of the brain, and then we put a significant p-value on it and publish a paper.
Therefore, it's true.
Thank you. No, in short, we cannot read the mind from the EEG waves. I cannot. Maybe Pedro can.
No, absolutely not. This actually just reminds me of another kind of similar story, not on psychedelics, but on dreams, actually. So some years ago, there was this thing called the Dream Catcher study that was really clever, actually. So this very big collaborative study of a big bunch of scientists, and they divided themselves in two groups, the groups that would collect data and the group that would analyze data. And the data was basically either people sleeping or, well, this was this sort of awakening paradigm where someone is sleeping and then you wake them up and you say, "Were you dreaming just now?" And turns out, well, sometimes they were, and you grab some EEG, and what they did was this kind of clever design where the people that were collecting the data obviously knew whether they were looking at dream EEG or non-dream EEG, but the data analysis team didn't know. And part of the study was, can the data analysis team actually guess whether the piece of data of EEG data they were looking at was actually from the dream or not? And the answer was pretty much no, actually. So they had this kind of different degrees of kind of revealing bits of information slowly. Like first you don't know anything about any of the EEGs, then you know that actually these three are either all dreaming or all of them non-dreaming. And they were revealing all of these progressively. By and large, at no stage during the process, the data analysis team could actually guess. Again, that was for dreaming. It strays a bit from the question of bad trips, which I have no experience about. So maybe I can kind of pass on to Lisa if you have anything on kind of bad trips in your study.
Bad trips in our study. I think maybe I can start with kind of the way we approach bad trips, or like I approach bad trips, is that there is rarely if you pay enough attention to your setting and your set and all these surrounding factors, where you're doing it, when you're doing it, all of these things, there's rarely a bad trip that is really a bad trip. There can be difficult trips, confusing trips, and I think, yeah, so maybe there's this thing that needs to be distinguished in terms of people having bad trips in our experience, in our study. Definitely some of the experiences people have are not easy, but I don't think anyone ever had a bad trip, as in, you know, the kind that is kind of scarring and hurtful. Yeah, and I think maybe that's also something that experienced psychedelic volunteers kind of know about, is sort of, you know, distinguishing between the bad trip that you can avoid by, you know, paying attention to, you know, your surroundings or setting, when you're doing it, where you're doing, with whom, blah, blah, the dose, and then, you know, bad trips that are just difficult. Where am I going with this? Yeah, maybe that answers the question. Or do you have a follow-up question?
So, but if you would know after the participants of the study would report that they went through something difficult, would that difficult time be readable on the EEG?
I don't think it would be readable on the EEG. I think it would be readable on the EEG maybe as noise. So, you know, people frowning or crying, being tense, all of those things, but not in the actual brain signal. I think it's much easier to tell people having a bad trip by, you know, just looking at them in the room, as opposed to trying to figure it out from the computer. Yeah, I don't think that's possible.
Thanks. Okay, I think we would have like two,
one last question, if I can,
or
three, but yeah, one. I have a question for Pedro. With the guys in the group, a flock of fish, trying to like integrate themselves into one organism, if they were allowed to talk, because you said that the security guards started to like boss them around, but if other people tried to like use the language to speak, or if there were groups that were successful just by like feeling each other and not talking?
No, so yeah, that's a great point actually. So no talking was one of the rules.
Oh, cool. So they broke the rules.
Yeah, no, they didn't actually talk. They were just kind of pointing at people and gesturing kind of very assertively. But no, I believe, if I remember correctly, was the rules were simply don't talk and keep walking, basically. But yeah, there was no talking. There were some forms of communication that happened, but no, in general, I mean, the intention was to make this as almost a meditative experience, right? So this is, again, imagine like a big room with a group of people, very dimly lit in general, so almost dark. You're wearing these hats, and these hats have these kind of lights on the side that blink every now and then. And you're supposed to be just walking without talking, with some kind of evocative music playing. And some people actually found it quite moving, right? Because when you can start synchronizing the lights, it's also kind of deliberately placed so that the lights actually illuminate people's faces. Mm-hmm. So you're moving around and you basically have to be looking at other people's faces to see if their light kind of lights up. And then as you kind of get better at it, the lights synchronize. And then you look around and you can basically, it's dark, and then suddenly there's a flash and you see lots of people smiling and looking around. And then it goes away, and then you continue walking, and then there's another flash. So there was some sort of communication for sure, but it was definitely not verbal. Like they were told not to speak, to answer the question.
And do you think it could get a bit psychedelic for the people, even though they were sober? The indigenous DMT in their bodies working.
For the next stage, we'll also put some plasma readings on this. I wouldn't go that far. Although part of the inspiration for this, I think definitely it didn't get psychedelic as such. People reported, so we had quite a variety of reports, and people reported feeling connected, feeling a bit more kind of empathetic towards others, and so on and so forth. But I wouldn't say it went to the kind of, it doesn't deserve the label psychedelic.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Last connection, because it worked in a small group of people, probably, and it worked better. You were talking about when there's a smaller group of people, the dynamic like works better, they can understand each other better. And my question is, for example, in indigenous tribes, kids or like children at a young age, they are connected to the medicine as well. The medicine that the tribe uses, we can say. But here we have different approach. There's like, okay, after 18, maybe it can be safe. And the indigenous people sometimes look at us a bit like confused that we don't allow children to experience this. So my question is, do you think it's because there's such a big portion of people who do not understand it, so for the kids it's like confusing? Or if it's, or that it would work in a small group of people for the kids, or what do you think? I know it's a sensitive topic probably, but you understand.
Are we still talking about the hats or about psychedelics?
No, sorry. My question is, there's a small group of people, for example, the tribe.
Yeah.
And when there's a kids around, they are connected to the way the tribe thinks and works and uses the medicines. But for example, in Europe or in Western world, it's not possible to connect the kids because everybody around is not connected as well, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
But also the medicine is illegal.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's a different medicine.
Well, indigenous people look at us confusedly when we tell them to use an elevator.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Part of it, what I'm trying to now like shift my understanding, based, for example, on discussions with Jack Aloka, is to understand this as a technology. And the technology is not only the psychedelic compound itself, it's not just the plant, but it's the cultural practice it is wrapped in. It's exactly what you describe as the relationships in the tribe. It's the way you work with a person who's going through a journey in the tribe. It's the way that the daily workforce is set up for those people going through a journey. This is all part of the medicine technology. And we simply don't have that technology. So applying it to children is completely out of question right now.
Okay, thank you. Yes, a quick question.
I was just thinking that not only that we don't have the technology, we are not even aware of how to use it properly. Like we don't have the manual of how to approach the technology. Oh, yeah. So I guess we reached the end. I would like to bring one more small dose of gratitude to all of our guests to be here tonight and to share their wisdom and knowledge, to all of you to come and participate and learn. And I hope that this will elevate us all. And thank you for coming, and until the next time.